Chapter 29, Negativity. Maxen had already assumed that Cosette was pampered at home. Her appearance already gave the biggest hint that she was someone whose parents would give everything, but he never actually thought Cosette was a real-life princess. He looked at the enormous gates that automatically opened for the car, driving through the long driveway towards the mansion he had only seen on television. Cosette was chatting with her father as she sat in the middle of Conrad and Maxen. The father and daughter duo weren't even paying attention to the home they would go home to, but Maxen couldn't take his eyes off of the mansion, slacked jaw. This can't be real. When the car stopped in front of the main house, Conrad didn't even need to open the door for him because a butler outside already did. "Welcome home, master." George, the butler, welcomed Conrad home and smiled when Cosette went out after her father. "Welcome home, young miss." "Hello, Butler George." Cosette smiled before she pointed her thumb over her shoulder. "I'm with my classmate." George glanced in the direction the young miss pointed at, only to hold his breath upon seeing a young man hitching outside the car. It wasn't just him, apparently. Everyone who was under the portico to welcome their masters fixed their widened eyes on this unfamiliar face, wearing the uniform of winter high school. "Just classmate," was what instantly crossed their head, sneaking up a glance at Cosette and Conrad. Feeling the gazes from the servants lined up in uniform, Maxen glanced at Cosette. This was crazy, he thought. It was hard to believe that those who were seen in dramas about the lifestyle of wealthy families truly happened in real life. For a moment, he felt as though vine roots grew under his feet, stilling him on the spot, unable to lift his gaze while gritting his teeth, as this was akin to a tight slap for him. "We have enough money to buy this entire hospital." Suddenly, those words she stated in the hospital in passing rang inside his head. He thought she was simply trying to reassure him not to worry about the hospital bill, but to think it wasn't an exaggeration. Maxen was dumbfounded. "Max, let's go," he snapped out of his thoughts when Cosette, who had her arms linked with Conrad, tipped her head towards the door. "Wait, Papa, slow down. Let's wait for Maxen for her." Conrad simply cast her a side-eye, but still walked slowly while taking the steps up of their home. "Good evening, young sir. Please head inside." George motioned his arm towards the entrance, sporting a kind smile. "Please excuse my discourtesy, but may I know your name so I can address you properly?" Hi. Maxen looked at the butler, rendered speechless by his politeness. "Max, just Max." "Let me escort you inside, Sir Max." George nodded mildly, leading the way while Maxen followed after getting ignored when he corrected George about the sir before his name. The latter could not help but glanced at the servants as they bowed to him and welcomed him into the manor like a young master. This was the first time Cosette took a classmate home, so everyone already knew they should treat her friend with the utmost respect. Usually, Cosette would wait for Conrad to arrive so they could enjoy dinner together, but since she went home late, the two of them headed straight to the dining hall with Maxen. Cosette darted her eyes between Conrad and Maxen. The latter was silent, which was understandable since he was surely surprised. Although she didn't plan to hide this from him, she also didn't have a solid reason to tell him about her life, since she didn't want to brag and Maxen never asked anyway. Still, she didn't consider that there would be a day when Maxen would initiate to walk her home. He is not the person who cares about people's status, she told herself, considering the pros and cons based on his personality. I'm sure nothing will change even if I turn out to be the daughter of the president of the country. Papa, did you eat the lunch I made for you? Cosette broke the stifling silence in the air as Conrad and Maxen never spoke a word. They were very much alike. One would think they were actually father and son if only they resembled even a bit. MHM ate everything. Conrad nodded, pleased when she smiled approvingly. Why are you walking home? Walking is healthy for a young person like me, and I want to spend more time with Max. Her bright and proud smile dominated her face, while Maxen nearly choked on his water. Meanwhile, her father's eyes glinted when they fell on Maxen, keeping it discreet for her not to notice. The maids, who were on standby, couldn't help but widen their eyes in shock. Some even have to purse their lips to keep their mouths shut. I see. Cosette blinked twice before she noticed the chilling inbound breeze coming from the head seat where Conrad sat. Is he jealous, or did he think Max and I are more than just classmates? She wondered, clearing her throat while raising her chin, keeping her beautiful smile. Let's stroll sometime, Papa. It'll be nice too if you and I take some night walks since I also want to spend some time with you, she suggested, heaving a sigh of relief when Conrad glanced at her and nodded. She had spent a fair amount of time in this mansion, and with everyone that she was slowly getting a gist of everyone's personality, especially Conrad. Therefore, she could sense when her father was happy, even when his expression remained the same. "Stop talking and eat first," Conrad urged, receiving a smile from her before she continued to gobble up the dinner. As she resumed eating, Maxen remained silent while darting his eyes between Cosette and Conrad. She didn't change the slightest, be it in this place or in school. Cosette was just like a sunshine giving vibrance to her surroundings. His jaw tightened when Conrad's eyes suddenly fell on him. Looking down on his plate, Maxen sat frozen under her father's sharp gaze, yet Conrad didn't speak a word to him. "What are you thinking, Max?" he asked himself when Cosette and Conrad engaged in a conversation once again. He mentally snickered in ridicule, as he couldn't believe he actually thought she was a bit normal, or rather, she was someone that was at least within his reach. He offered to walk her home because he was really worried about her. However, he didn't expect her to be an heiress. He wasn't ready for this revelation. It just made him realize she was someone he shouldn't even dream of. If she was a part of the middle class, he could work hard to stand on the same ground as her and be the friend that deserved her. But now, even if he worked himself to the bones, what he could give to her would mean nothing. The ice cream he bought for her earlier, she could buy an entire factory of ice cream if only she asked her father. This reality was truly a painful slap to his face. "Maxen Cloven, is it?" Conrad's voice brought him back from his trance. Maxen raised his head and nodded, keeping a dead expression with lifeless eyes. "Yes, sir." "You should stay for tonight," Conrad suggested, baffling Maxen for a second before the latter was ready to refuse. But just like Cosette, the former already decided, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. "It is best if you stay tonight, Mr. Cloven. I also want to take a moment of your time after this dinner." "Papa, you will not bully Maxen, will you?" Cosette narrowed her eyes at Conrad, as she was prepared to hide Maxen if that was her father's plan. "Cozy, do you think so badly of your father?" She frowned because she couldn't argue if he said it like that. No, of course not. "Don't worry," Conrad let out a shallow breath as he offered her a subtle smile. "I just want to talk to your friend, a man-to-man talk." "All right." Maxen didn't voice out his thoughts, but he already guessed what Conrad would say. It was either, "Stay away from my daughter," or "Don't even think of exploiting our family." Those were just the mildest thoughts that crossed his head, and those thoughts grew more negative with every passing second. He balled his hand underneath the table as he gazed at the fancy dinner they were eating. "I feel sick," he thought, feeling this knot in his stomach tighten. "I can't breathe." Chapter 30, A Father's Words. In Conrad's study room, Maxen stood near the entrance while Conrad approached the stand where a decanter of wine was stored. But just before he could pour himself a glass, he looked back at the young man he invited for a talk. "Sit down, Mr. Cloven." Conrad motioned his hand towards the couch, picked up the decanter and 2 empty glasses, and perched on the head seat. Maxen was on the long couch. "Do you drink?" asked Conrad as soon as he placed the decanter and glasses on the coffee table, glancing at Maxen. "No, sir." His answer was short and almost toneless. Conrad rocked his head, shoving his hand inside his pocket only to take out a cigarette tin which he placed on top of the table. "Do you smoke?" "I quit not long ago." "Since you've quit, I won't offer you a stick." "It's fine, sir." Maxen glanced at Cosette's father, watching the latter lean back with the glass in his hand. The longer he stuck around this man, the more nervous he felt. Sweat already damped his back, waiting for the harsh words Conrad had in store for him. The only positive thought inside the young man was the unspoken belittling that was yet to leave this man's lips. With just a glance, one would instantly realize Conrad came from an entirely different world. Even with how he held the glass, the way those naturally sharp eyes glint, the aura, and Conrad as a whole. He was a powerful and influential man. He wasn't just rich. Conrad was a man whose words held power, and his existence was important to the economy. "Relax, Mr. Cloven, don't be nervous. I'm simply appalled because this is the first time my daughter brought home a friend." Conrad's cool voice broke the stifling silence, noticing the nervousness of the young man. Although he understood the boy, Conrad would be lying if he said he was perfectly fine with all this. Cosette was a girl, and for her to introduce a male friend, slightly worried and overprotective father like him, especially now that Cosette was changing, unlike how she was in the past. Even so, he didn't want to hurt his daughter just because he wasn't ready to let his little princess hold another man's hand. She was already at the age where she would experiment and explore her youth. Still, he wanted to supervise, just in case. "I won't beat around the bush, Mr. Cloven. I would like to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." He cleared his throat and looked Maxen straight in the eye. Are you my daughter's boyfriend? Maxen's back stiffened and then breathed out. No, sir. Good, Conrad rocked his head. Although I want my daughter to enjoy her youth, I won't allow her to marry for the next 50 years. As silence descended on them once again, Conrad simply studied the young lad while tapping his fingers against the armrest and twirling the wine in his other hand. When he spoke once again, Maxen raised his eyes at him. Mr. Cloven, I will be very direct and honest with you. Conrad broke the silence once again, while Maxen subconsciously held his breath. This is it, he thought, preparing his heart for everything this man had to say. Cosette used to be a strict young lady. She's ambitious and competitive. At a young age, she was already preparing herself to take over the company and prove to everyone that she was capable. In doing so, she forgot that she is just a young girl who should enjoy her youth and make memories. Unlike what Maxen expected, Conrad looked at the wine in his hand and spoke about how was his daughter in the past. We used to live under the same roof and barely spoke a word to each other, and all those conversations always end on a bad note. Cosette wanted to involve herself more in the company so bad, but I told her to take it easy. However, she never listened and took it as me not having enough confidence in her. There was bitterness that flashed across Conrad's eyes, which didn't go unnoticed by Maxen. He continued. I don't blame her though. I knew she's a capable young lady, but as someone who lived for the money, for the power his entire life, I do not want my daughter to walk on the same path as I did. Conrad raised his eyes at Maxen. I mean it when I say I do not want her to marry for the next 50 years, but obviously that is just a selfish whim of a father. I will never stand in my daughter's way, especially in what makes her happy. Cosette is the only one I have, and she means the world to me, Mr. Cloven. Her happiness is my happiness, and so is her pain. As a father, I would trade the world just to make her happy and see her smile. That is why I asked a moment of your time to indulge with me, he added. As I've said, this is the first time Cosette brought a friend over. Matter of fact, she never called the connections she made in the past friends. She called them as prospective business partners, connections, in the future. In the society we walked in, calling someone a friend is rare. It had always been a matter of give and take, and how the other person could benefit and what they can offer you. Hence, I wanted to thank you for becoming my daughter's friend and for taking care of her. Conrad offered a meek smile, while an enormous question mark hovered over Maxen's head. What? He wondered, thinking he misheard Conrad's remarks. He's thanking me for becoming his daughter's friend. Me, why? Conrad chuckled faintly, seeing the puzzlement in the boy's eyes. It was obvious Maxen had thought of the worst, and Conrad couldn't blame him. If not for the fact that Maxen wanted to walk her home because he was worried it was already late for a young lady to travel alone, he would have had second thoughts. Although I am thankful for this friendship, I also like to ask you a favor. He cleared his throat and his expression grew solemn. As her father, all I ask from you is to not make my daughter cry, Mr. Cloven. I am a person who believed in development. Therefore, I can't rule out that your young hearts might fall for each other. It doesn't matter if you end up liking her or the other way around. All I'm saying is, wait for the right time and take things slowly if that happened, and if it's one-sided. He paused and pondered about it. If it's just you, I hope you respect my daughter's decision, and if it's just her, get out of her life and end the friendship so she wouldn't hurt anymore. Because at the end of the day, anyone who makes her cry will be my enemy, and I'm telling you beforehand you don't want me as your enemy. I will destroy you, he added, completely and mercilessly, and that is not a threat, neither it is a promise. It's a statement and a fact. There was a moment of silence between the two as they stared at each other. Although Conrad's last remarks were enough to scare anyone, they sounded different in Maxen's ears. Conrad was simply trying to protect his daughter, and never once did he point out Maxen's upbringing, status, or worth, which surprised the young man. If anything, Conrad spoke to him man to man, and with respect which Maxen rarely received. I understand, sir. Maxen hung his head low, but when he raised his head, Conrad smiled slightly. Then I'd take that as a promise. Conrad nodded, pleased that Maxen was quick to understand the worries of a single father who simply treasured his daughter. Very well, you are always welcome in our home, anytime you like, just not in my daughter's bedroom. Chapter 31, a curse he would chant for years. Cosette was packing back and forth in her room nervously, unaware that she had been biting the tip of her thumb. She wanted to join Conrad and Maxen just to make sure her father wouldn't say anything that might trigger the villain in the making. All the efforts in getting Maxen's trust would all go down the drain if that happened. Young miss, here's your... Lucia trailed off as she entered the young miss's room, catching the latter pace back and forth without even noticing her presence. She sighed, but then smiled subtly. Young miss, she called softly as she entered the room while carrying a tray with a glass of milk on top of it. Her call caused Cosette to flinch back to the current lapse. Nanny Lucia came out and exclaimed, patting her chest as she didn't notice Lucia until she caught her shadow stretching to her feet. Goodness, since when have you been here? Just now, young miss. Lucia chuckled as she placed the glass of milk over the nightstand. Are you worried about Sir Cloven and the master? Her question immediately brought a frown to Cosette's face as she dragged her feet and threw herself onto the bed. Staring at the ceiling, she moved her head only to see Lucia's gentle smile from an upside-down perspective. Nanny Lucia, what do you think Papa wants with Maxen? She asked with a voice full of worry. Young miss, Lucia carefully sat on the edge of the bed, keeping her gentle eyes on her. Whatever the master's reason for inviting Sir Cloven to his study, I'm certain it's nothing to worry about. Do you still not trust the master? Cosette's frown remained as she sighed. It's not like that, Nana. It's just Maxen had been through a lot. She peeled her eyes away from Lucia to the ceiling. I know Papa is the best of the best and the most handsome father in the entire novel planet. But thing is, Maxen's life had been nothing but a series of misfortune and tragedy. People always treat him terribly unprovoked and even bully him. It's not even an exaggeration that this world is against Max. She continued, holding her tears back while thinking of what she had seen so far that wasn't even included in the novel. Although he is quite rude, repelling people is just his defense mechanism to protect himself. All he needs is a little kindness and understanding, just a little warmth will do. Lucia's eyes softened as Cosette's concern towards Maxen also moved her. She could still remember the time Cosette would bat an eye at other people, as she was always busy staring at her goal. So it put her heart at rest that Cosette, whom she had watched grow up, was gaining some compassion for others. Young miss, she cajoled, adjusting her seat so she could massage her head. The master, although he struggles to express his heart, I'm certain he understands yours. He will not do or say something that will put a strain on your friendship with Sir Cloven. Cosette bit her bottom lip while staring at those pair of gentle eyes hovering over her. Lucia nodded in encouragement. Don't worry, I put my hand in my heart and say everything will turn out well. Nana. So you do not worry anymore and rest early since you will still make your lunch boxes early tomorrow, she encouraged with a nod. It didn't take long before Cosette huffed as she nodded. You're right, I can still use the lunchbox as leverage to Papa. Lucia chuckled at Cosette's remarks, helping her settle on the bed, and handed her the glass of milk. Meanwhile, when Maxen left Conrad's study, a shallow breath slipped past his lips. He looked back at the shut door, bearing this incomprehensible countenance. All the things he expected to hear from Cosette's father didn't come. Maxen had already prepared his reply just in case, but nothing. Not only Conrad didn't tell him to stay away from his daughter, but he also considered that Maxen's and Cosette's feelings might develop into something deeper, and yet he still welcomed him into their house, mansion. He's just as strange as that girl, he thought, but then again, he didn't know what it was like to have a loving parent. Hence, this was like a puzzle to him. As he walked through the hallway, Maxen shoved his hand inside his pocket. Very strange thing to say to a person like me. How can he trust someone like me? No, actually, how can they both trust someone like me? Both father and daughter were a weird pair for him, but deep down he couldn't help but smile. Honestly, he felt welcomed for once. Conrad's words about not caring which family he came from and his past were something Maxen didn't expect to hear from anyone. After all, everyone always looked at a person's past and judged them from it. That was why Maxen never felt the need to change. No matter what he did, his past would always be there. Also, it was not like the world liked him to give him a chance to change. His life circumstances were just getting harder by the day. But ever since Cosette pranced into his life like a diva, it somehow became just a tiny bit bearable. Hurt her, he snickered as he shook his head, as if I can do that. Maxen still believed that Cosette would never like him as a man. Not only she was beautiful, but she also came from a well-off family. The reason he wasn't even putting up the effort or dared think further just like Conrad. It was just impossible. Being her friend is my finish line, he told himself, more like convinced himself. That's the only thing I can give to her, friendship. Because if he thought further or wanted deeper than that, he already knew the outcome. This was his way to protect himself and Cosette, and this friendship she single-handedly created. She isn't someone I can think like that, he uttered to himself, mentally nodding while he scratched the back of his head. That's right, she is someone beyond my reach. His smile remained, but his eyes glinted with bitterness. He didn't like her romantically, but he didn't dislike her as well. It was just that he had these conflicting feelings. He blamed Conrad for giving him the idea. But still, this truth that an heiress like Cosette, who was studying in a normal high school and mingling with mortals, was akin to a tight slap in the face. She was not someone he should even dream about. He doesn't deserve her. Even at this young age, Maxen knew that these words would be the curse he would chant for years. Each time she would make his heart flutter, and each time she would see her with another man, these words he was telling himself right now would bind his heart from giving in to his selfish desire. Chapter 32. Good morning. Morning came, and Maxen was already up before dawn. Although this was the first time he slept in such a lavish place, his thoughts kept him awake almost the entire night. "This is just a guest room, but it also has a bathroom and many stuff," he mumbled while drying his damped hair with a towel, looking around at the spacious hotel-like guest room. "Their bathroom has more space than my place." A faint breath slipped past his lips as he glanced back at the bathroom door he came from. The butler came to him last night, giving him a change of clothes, and asking for his uniform so they could clean it for tomorrow. At first, Maxen refused and told them he could wash his uniform himself. However, he soon realized the servants in this house wouldn't take no for an answer. Everyone, be it the masters of the house or their servants, was stubborn, so he finally gave in and let them do as they pleased, just so they leave him alone. It was the same in the problem of correcting them, but they kept addressing him as Mr. or Sir, and then it escalated to a young master. He gave up correcting them before they would address him as a god. Now, Maxen had to change to the other pair of clothes they handed him last night. It was just a simple white t-shirt and comfortable sweatpants, and yet he couldn't feel the sense of simplicity in it for reasons he couldn't explain. "Should I go and ask them for the uniform? They might think I am acting all high and mighty just because I'm locking myself in this room," he mumbled, with his thoughts getting more negative by the second, packing back and forth while glancing at the door every 2 seconds. Although everyone had been warm and kind to him, Maxen had met tons of people who were kind at first but changed in just a matter of weeks, which would then lead to verbal abuse that had devastated his fragile heart in the past. So it was not that he didn't want to trust everyone. It was just that he couldn't open his heart so easily to anyone or even to himself. He raised a brow when he heard a faint commotion outside. Since he didn't know what to do while waiting for his uniform, he carefully opened the door and poked his head out to check what was going on. The sound was just faint. The guest room was on the first floor of the mansion. He was close to the mansion's lobby and dining room where the noises were coming from. Slowly and vigilantly, Maxen followed the sound, and it led him to the lobby. There were a few servants who greeted him good morning on the way, so he asked one of them what was the noise all about. It's the young miss," said the maid with a smile, trying to stop herself from yawning. "You can see her there, young Master Max." "It's not young master, I mean. Okay." Maxen bit his tongue and watched the maid yawn before she headed to wherever her destination was. "Everyone I met so far looks as though it's still too early for them to be up." It was as if they weren't used to being awake this early. He thought, not dwelling on it as he shook his head. He then gazed in the direction the maid previously pointed at where she mentioned Cosette was. "I didn't know she'll be up this early." Maxen then headed to the kitchen to see what Cosette was doing so early in the morning. As soon as he reached the entrance of the kitchen, his eyes immediately caught someone moving lethargically in the kitchen. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, she was still in her pajamas and clearly groggy, a look Maxen never thought he'd ever get to see. He narrowed his eyes, leaning his side against the jamb, and watched her move around the kitchen. Cosette was yawning, but her focus remained on her assignment. With how rich they were, it's a surprise that she's making her own breakfast, he thought before his eyes fell on the table near the kitchen counter. His brows furrowed before his eyes softened when he recognized the empty lunch boxes already prepared on the table. She always brags about waking up early to make those lunch boxes, but to think she is actually saying the truth. Wait. Suddenly, Maxen wondered if he failed to eat any of the lunch boxes she brought him. Although he refused her constantly, he would always end up eating it because Cosette was getting more creative in making excuses for him to eat it. But now, he would feel sorry if he succeeded even once, knowing she was working this hard. Forget about pride, but he didn't want to take her sincerity for granted. Good thing I don't recall not eating with her. He heaved a sigh of relief, disregarding his pride for her. He snapped his eyes and raised them when he suddenly heard her voice. "Oh, Max!" Cosette's initial dull expression brightened up when she caught his figure standing by the entrance. "Good morning, Tilda, you're early." Finish line came to his head upon witnessing how her expression changed the moment she saw him. I always wake up early. Maxen shrugged as he trudged inside, walking straight to the kitchen counter. You always wake up early, but consistently come to school late. Cosette pouted as she clicked her tongue, pointing at him while holding a spatula. Just sit over there while I prepare this. Maxen raised a brow as she pointed her chin towards the table and chairs. He looked back before setting his eyes back on her. You're not asking me to help, he asked while leaning against the kitchen counter. Cosette held the spatula and waved it. No need. Why? What do you mean, why? Her brows knitted as she tilted her head. This is my morning ritual, and I enjoy cooking food for my loved ones. It won't be the same if I get help from anyone. I think I already told you about this before, but you're not listening. Cosette frowned and shook her head, shooting him a judgmental look while Maxen just gazed at her. Right, he thought. He believed she mentioned something like that between the lines, but he wasn't listening. Or rather, he didn't want to think about it and pretended he didn't hear her the first time. Loved ones, huh? Maxen looked back at the lunch boxes and there were 3. The pink one was for Cosette, the black one was for Maxen, and the green one. Was it for her father? He glanced up as he imagined Conrad bringing an ugly lunch box to his work. Maxen scrunched his nose up, but he couldn't judge the man in question. If anything, it was another thing to admire and respect about her father. If I was him, I will also not care since she made it with all her heart. His eyes softened as he returned his gaze back to Cosette. She was now busy once again, but Maxen indulged in watching how those lunch boxes were made. Last night was a break from the pattern of his predictable life. This morning, too, he felt conflicted about it, but the atmosphere in the kitchen felt warm, leaving a deep trace in his heart, as he already knew this moment was something he would cherish forever. Chapter 33, 10. Bye-bye, Papa Tilda. Cosette waved at Conrad as the window of the back passenger seat rolled up. Ever since Cosette hitched a ride with Conrad, it somehow became their routine now. Her father was now the person dropping her off at the bus stop, just like today. Maxen glanced at her as she still kept waving even when the car sped away. He remained silent as he looked in the other way, checking if the next bus was coming. Max, you didn't eat a lot this breakfast. He nearly flinched when she came up to his side to berate him. He leaned back, seeing her narrow her eyes while bobbing her face to examine him. I don't usually eat breakfast, he explained while staring at her in dismay. You're too close. Stand back a bit, will you? Cosette frowned but still took a step back. You didn't eat a lot during dinner too last night. Are you saying you don't usually eat dinner too? If I don't make you lunch, you won't eat lunch too. Are you trying to give yourself a slow and painful death? What? Maxen, you should take care of yourself. Stop nagging me like a mother. He clicked his tongue and waved, looking away. Her frown persisted because Maxen was as cold as ever. Although he was now speaking to her a bit more, she always felt he was keeping his distance. Not that she was growing impatient to get close to him, but she just kept wondering if he was seeing her as a nuisance or a friend. I just want to change his fate, she complained internally, sighing as her shoulders went up and down. I don't want to be that girl he would remember who used to stalk him once the story starts, but someone he can call his first friend. While Cosette was mentally ripping her scalp in distress, she didn't notice that he was staring at her. The side of his lips hooked up momentarily before his smile disappeared. I eat dinner, he said, making her look up only to see him gazing in the same direction. I am not just the type to eat a lot in one sitting. I'm not a pig like you. A pig, she gasped as she gazed at him in dismay. Maxen glanced at her as the bus finally arrived. A glutton, then, he smirked as he walked towards the bus door. Max, Cosette yelled as she stomped her feet to follow him. How can you say I am a glutton and a pig? Do you have eye problems? You have more weight than me. Just because I have a slow metabolism doesn't mean I have a dragon inside my stomach. But we're still like a 10 when we walk side by side, Cosette grumbled before she mischievously giggled. 10, 1 and 0, like a pair, you know, hee. This time, Cosette walked past him like a little devil as he suddenly paused. His eyes landed on her back and caught her sitting in one of the empty seats with a smug grin on her face. What a girl, Maxen sighed and shook his head before resuming in his stride. Since there was more space, Maxen took another empty seat across from her, but he jolted when Cosette changed seats and sat beside him. Hey, he yelled, looking at her in dismay. What are you doing here? Sitting. Sit in another seat, there's a lot that's vacant. Max, we're not 10 if we're not together. I don't care about being 10. Cosette frowned and narrowed her eyes. This was the perfect chance to chat with him and get close to him. So if ever in the future, He could think of his precious friend whenever he would see a bus, or just needed a good memory to think about. Fine, Maxen ruffled his hair as he looked away, eyes on the window. Sit wherever you like, just don't bother. I will bother you, she affirmed, which sounded more like a threat even before he could finish his sentence. But just when she thought Maxen would argue with her or looked at her in disbelief, he didn't. Instead, he remained silent and kept his eyes on the window. Gosh, why is it so hard to get close to you? She mumbled and clicked her tongue, moving her butt on the seat to find her comfort place. Well, who am I to complain? I'm already happy that we're going to school together. Cosette looked down with a sweet smile on her face. Even though taking care of her favorite character was truly a challenge, she couldn't really be mad about him. If anything, it just made sense, since this world kept going against him. Meanwhile, Maxen stole a glance from her and caught that genuine and sweet smile. Don't look so happy. He looked away to hide the faint blush on his cheek. Since the ride would take a while, Maxen leaned back. They left her home too early so they wouldn't be late for school. Surely Cosette was diligent, which was very admirable. His eyes remained on the window, thinking that she was probably busy with her phone to kill time or something. Only a minute later did he figure out that wasn't the case. Maxen stiffened when he felt a weight on his shoulder. He looked at her on instinct and furrowed his brows. So she usually falls asleep on the way to school, he thought, letting out a sharp breath along with a faint chuckle. She's really strange. He lowered his shoulder as he slid down a bit so her neck wouldn't feel too stiff once she woke up. In his mind there were countless servants in the mansion, but none of them offered to help Cosette make the lunch boxes. He was certain because, just like how she refused his help, she surely refused other people's help. Cosette was a stubborn one after all. Why does she work so hard if she can get everything even without trying? He wondered while staring at her with a subtle smile. Well, I will probably never understand since it's you. I don't understand what you really want from me. Maxen slowly closed his eyes as he felt a little sleepy as well. I wonder, what did you see in me? Was what crossed his head before taking a nap on this long, yet short ride to school. Chapter 34, School Days. Days had passed since Maxen stayed over in the Blac's mansion. Even after knowing that she was an heiress, Cosette thought Maxen didn't care because he treated her the same. Not that she was complaining. Actually, it was better than he was letting her stick around him, despite all that revelation. Things had been great between them too. They didn't skip classes anymore because Maxen would get back to class after lunch. Of course, they would still eat on the rooftop or in the classroom during lunchtime. KINGGGG. Cosette clapped her hand as soon as the school bell rang for lunch. But before she could turn her head to Maxen, her brows rose when Sarah, who was sitting in front of her, dragged her chair close to her desk. Cozy, do you want to have lunch together? She asked as she pivoted on her seat, draping an arm over the chair. We brought lunch boxes too, look. Sarah raised her lunch box with the same smile, before she jerked her chin to Amy and Faye. Cosette then turned to the people the former pointed at, only to see Amy and Faye displaying their lunch boxes. Aha! Cosette glanced at Maxen, who was slumped on his desk, fast asleep. Well, if only Maxen agreed to join us. She sported an apologetic smile as soon as she saw the frown on the girls' faces. Cosette felt bad for not hanging out with them as much as during her first week in the school, but her priority was Maxen. She transmigrated into this world with a mission. When Maxen grunted, they all looked at him with eyes glinting. Even before Maxen could see the intense glare from his side, he already felt a chill run down his spine. He shuddered when he turned his head to them, only to see his classmates gawking at him. What? He asked with furrowed brows. We want to eat lunch with Cozy too, but she said she will only eat with us if you join us, Faye explained, making Maxen glance at her. You should join us. It's not good to hog your girlfriend all to yourself. Maxen and Cosette froze at Faye's remarks. Girlfriend, although they both froze up, Cosette's face turned red as if that was a compliment to her. Why not? Maxen was her idol and she was his superfan. Meanwhile, Maxen secretly curled his fingers into a fist. She's not my girlfriend, came out a cold and firm clarification. Faye, Amy, and Sarah looked at each other. Of course, they knew that, but they were just teasing him since that was what others believed. But Maxen sounded angry for some reason. Why? The girls couldn't understand since Cosette was more beautiful than the school belle. If only Cosette knew her popularity. Do you have to voice out your dismay like that? Cosette frowned, not taking Maxen's words to the heart, as that was the truth. She carefully placed the lunchbox on his desk while clicking her tongue. Max is so heartless. Even if you don't like me, you shouldn't be so mad about that. The space between Maxen's brows furrowed as he looked at her pout. I'm just trying to clear up the misunderstanding, he explained internally, but bit his tongue and kept his thoughts to himself. When Cosette faced the girls, she looked so happy as she could eat with them again. The four of them dragged their desk to make a larger table where they could eat and gossip. Meanwhile, Maxen just glanced at her. That's right, he thought while opening the lid of the lunchbox she prepared. She kept following me that she is neglecting her friends. We should start staying in the classroom for lunch. Maxen wasn't expecting her to bring him lunch forever, but after seeing her efforts, he swallowed his pride and kept accepting them normally. He glanced at her once again and saw her giggling with the girls. His eyes softened before averting his gaze from her. Although the three female classmates just dragged their desks to Cosette's, their distance felt like a mile. In his mind, Cosette was someone who would be surrounded by lots of people. She was the type of person who could make other people want to have her attention or be a part of her life. Max, he flinched when Cosette suddenly called him. He looked at her, only to see her raising her brows. Should we drag our desk to you? She asked with an innocent expression. Huh? You said we will be having lunch together. How can this be called eating lunch together if you're so far away? She explained in a matter-of-factly and clicked her tongue. Far away, Maxen raised a brow as their distance wasn't that far, at least to them. But to think she would say the things he thought he was the only one who noticed, another part of the wall around his heart cracked. Cosette shook her head and sighed, casting the three a look. Is it okay if we move to him? Max is not a gentleman. Of course, Sarah nodded and cast the other two a look, and they also nodded. But is he fine with that? She then leaned forward and placed her hand beside her lips to whisper. They liked Cosette, but she liked Maxen for some reason. So to get close to their classmate, they had to accept Maxen as well. However, Maxen wasn't easy to deal with, and they all had a bad impression of him. Of course, Maxen is a good person, Cosette nodded reassuringly. Although he is blunt, he is very kind and considerate. Once you get used to him, you'll see he's not a very scary person. Right, Max, she added and cast him a look. Huh? See, Cosette didn't even give him the chance to disagree, as she flashed the girls a smile. He said he's fine with that. Sarah, Amy, and Faye looked at each other before they nodded. With that being said, Maxen flinched as the four of them sprung up to their feet. When they turned their heads to him and saw how their eyes glinted, Maxen gulped down. Without a word, they dragged their desk close to his desk and formed a bigger table. Maxen, it's all right, Cosette smiled sweetly at him. It's all right, she stressed with the same smile, placing her fingers on his arm, ready to pinch him if he said no. Sometimes she's surprisingly scary, he thought as he sighed and nodded, looking away while the girls giggled excitedly. I have a feeling this group will keep growing. Chapter 35, Just Today. Like any other day like usual, the bell rang when classes were over. Today Cosette would have to clean the classroom once again, so as soon as the bell rang, she pivoted on her chair and faced Maxen. What do you want now? Asked Maxen out of irritation as he picked up his almost empty bag. I will have to clean the room, she pouted as her shoulders lowered. Will you wait for me? He quirked a brow, and why will I wait for you? Because we're friends, aren't you worried that this young lady will have to walk home on her own? Cosette shamelessly planted her palm across her chest, batting her eyelashes ever so slowly while giving him puppy eyes. You waited for me before, can you do that today too? Really, I can't reason with her. Maxen clicked his tongue as he let out a sigh. He didn't speak immediately as he stood from his seat. Cosette frowned when she thought he wouldn't wait for her, only for her eyes to light up a second later. Make it quick, that was all he said as he marched away, leaving her smiling from ear to ear. Gosh, he always acts tough and unbothered, but I think he's really softening up to me, Cosette mumbled and giggled, staring at Maxen's back. He's so cute. Who's cute? She jumped when Sarah suddenly leaned her face while sitting on her chair in front of Cosette. Cozy, do you perhaps like Maxen? What? Is he your type? Faye also chimed in while leaning against her desk, eyes on Cosette. Is this what they call one-sided love, where the girl is the one pursuing the guy until he falls for her? Amy clasped her hands together, daydreaming about the love story she was creating inside her head. Hey, you think too much. Cosette chuckled as she glanced at the door where Maxen left. But you see, Max is really good looking. It is not obvious now because he still had some scars and his face is still healing, but I don't understand why no one thinks so. She looked at the girls only to see them sigh. What? She asked in puzzlement. Cozy, do you have an eye problem? I mean, sure, although Maxen isn't that bad and is charming despite his weight, there's a reason everyone keeps their distance from him. Sarah explained awkwardly as if this was something she shouldn't talk about. Why is that? Cosette asked while cocking her head to the side. The three girls came closer to her as Faye looked around cautiously. Their action, as if they were holding classified information, made Cosette also stay cautious. You see, when the first girl who confessed her feelings to Maxen happened, she was targeted by Maxen's enemies. They mistook her for his girlfriend and used her to bait Maxen. No one actually knows the details, but that girl transferred after the incident. Faye gossiped in one breath, warning Cosette about it, since Maxen was still someone who had tons of enemies from other schools, and in this school. That's why even when some girls like him, they're too afraid to be tangled with him, Amy added while nodding. Cozy, you should also be careful. Maxen doesn't only have enemies from students from other schools, but in our school as well. One of our seniors, who is also known to be a delinquent, is still in the hospital because of his injury. But if he returned here, trouble will only happen since he had some bad blood with Maxen. Sarah chimed in while raising a finger, staring at Cosette solemnly. Cosette just glanced at the three of them with pursed lips. This was something she had never heard about before or read in the novel, so she didn't know these small details. A smile resurfaced on her face. Don't worry, I can protect myself, she reassured with a nod. Although Cosette was unsure if she also gained the real Cosette's talent and strength, just like her intelligence, she could start learning from now. When Cosette bid the three goodbyes, she caught Maxen waiting for her on the floor below their classroom. She wanted to approach him quickly, but stopped and just stared at him. Maxen was leaning against the window, staring outside the campus while deep in thought. Her eyes softened as she smiled subtly. I'm happy that our days had been very peaceful. A sigh of relief slipped past her lips, staring at Maxen as the orange ray of light hit his face. He was really beautiful, she thought. Maxen, although a bit chubby and still had some scars, looked stunning. Well, he was the main antagonist of the story, so his looks would stand out among everyone. I really hope my efforts will bear fruit, she thought while staring at him. I really hope Maxen will be happy and lead a better life. If he did, then everyone will be happy. Asher and Mia will be together, Maxen will find his peace, and Cosette will also be happy with her father, Conrad. I still can't believe I am inside a novel, she muttered with an incomprehensible smile as her eyes lowered to the floor. I wonder if I really died and was stuck in here, or I am just in a comatose. There was a part of her that still couldn't treat this world as her reality. How could she? Even when she kept waking up in this world, she was afraid, terrified, even. She constantly feared that once she accepted this world as her reality, it would devastate her if she woke up to her real world. So Cosette could only stand on that thin line between reality and fantasy. For her, they were all characters in the novel. Even Faye, Amy, and Sarah, who weren't mentioned in the story, were all characters in the story. What are you thinking so hard? Cosette looked up when she heard his voice close. Did something happen again? Is there another rumor again? Her eyes softened as a subtle smile appeared on her face. Maxen, shall we buy some ice cream on the way? So there's really a problem. There's none, but I want to have ice cream. Cosette let out a sharp breath as she tossed her thought at the back of her head. Without thinking, Cosette reached for his hand to hold just his index finger. His shoulder and spine instantly tensed up as his eyes dilated a little. Max, can I hold your finger just today? I feel somehow a bit scared you will vanish if I don't hold on to you, came out a weak voice with a wry smile. Just today, let me cling to you a bit more. Her eyes lowered as she stared at Maxen's long and slender fingers. Meanwhile, Maxen furrowed his brows as his jaw tightened. She sounded oddly sad and scared at the same time, making him worry and wonder what caused her to impose such melancholic air. Just today then, she smiled when he agreed. Just today, Cosette. She nodded, smiling, closed-lipped. MHM. And with that, she followed him while holding his finger, as if afraid she would touch if she didn't hold on to something or someone. Chapter 36. A Life with My Baby Villain. Days had passed like usual, but Cosette cherished each day. Even though they were the recurring events of waking up early to make lunch boxes, hitch a ride with Conrad to the bus stop, going to school, having lunch with Max and the girls, and their slightly growing number as some of their classmates also started bringing lunch boxes, and walking home with Maxen. Cosette smiled as her eyes softened, gazing down at the diary she was writing. Ever since she started making lunch boxes, she decided to start a daily journal just in case she would leave this world. In that case, the real Cosette who would return could read it, hopefully. It's Friday again, she whispered, losing count of how many weeks she had been in the world of this novel. It feels like I am actually back in my life. The only difference between her life and the life she was currently living was she wasn't sick, and she was rich, filthy rich. Also, some abnormality in the world as everyone seemed to like her. Well, in the novel, it is said that Cosette is a person to catch everyone's eyes, she muttered while tapping the end of the pen against her journal, while Mia is a person who catches a person's heart. Since the villainess of the story lived a perfect life, I guess this is what the author meant by that. To her, it was only natural for her to get everyone's attention and get admired for the most insignificant reason, since her life was written that way. That was why Cosette liked Maxen even more, since he's someone who was a little bit reasonable in this world. That's where the cliché line enters, "You're the first person who did this to me." Her nose scrunched up whenever she recalled that line of Cosette, but as long as I'm in this body, that will never happen. She giggled happily, thinking that she was too busy with Maxen. She barely cared about the male lead and female lead, not that she wasn't happy to meet them if she did, but her priority was to change Maxen's ending. She didn't know until when she would be in this world after all. Let's see, Cosette planted her palms on the edge of the desk, pushing herself away as she leaned back. At first, Maxen is like a wounded cat who is ready to claw anyone who comes near him, but now he is rather lenient in everything. I can even argue with him now, and he doesn't mind. The more Cosette reviewed her relationship with Maxen, the more the side of her lips stretched wider. She didn't realize it until now, but their relationship actually improved significantly. Although he was still annoyed at everything, he was more tolerant. If anything, he was just letting her drag him around to meet new friends. His relationship with their classmates also improved as they had been joining them for lunch. Things just happened, but the majority of the section F now brought lunch, and they would form a huge table where everyone would eat like a family. I didn't get to experience all that before, she muttered with a smile, recalling her previous life. I was sick almost all my life, so it feels nice to have friends. Her smile slowly disappeared as she mentioned that word, friends. Everyone in section F were just unmentioned characters in the novel, but to her, she was seeing them as her friends and classmates. She sighed, cocking her head back to look at the ceiling. Is it really fine to think this is my reality now? But that's weird. I mean, is someone reading what I am saying now? Those types of questions would cross her mind, but then again, the story hadn't started yet. So she thought, even when she was inside the novel, no one would know about her actions and plans until now. Is it possible that the novel will end in the first volume? She wondered deeply, batting her eyes. Well, if I overwrote Maxen's bloody path, it can be. If that happens, that means Cosette and Maxen will not be part of the story anymore. Well, I'm sure I will be part of that one way or another, since I am someone who shares Ash's social circle. But Cosette grinned happily. I will not be the one who will be in Ash's way. I'll just fangirl on the sideline and root for him and Mia. She giggled, getting excited once that time comes. Gosh, I want to attend their wedding. She remained silent as she imagined watching the happenings in the novel in the front row seat. Mia and Asha had a lovely story together, so seeing their love story unfold with her own two eyes was like a fan's dream come true. Meeting them was one thing too. I should be patient, she told herself, cocking her head back to close her daily journey. As she did, her eyes caught the title on the first page. A Life with My Baby Villain. Her smile grew wider as she added a heart to the end of his name. I feel like a proud mother. Tomorrow I will see Asha. I'm excited to meet some characters as well too, but I will surely miss my number one baby villain. Right, Cosette snapped her eyes before grabbing her smartphone that was on the side of the desk. She shrugged and went to message Maxen. To Max, are you still awake? Will he reply, she wondered, staring at the phone's screen while cupping her jaw. When 2 minutes have gone by and there was still no reply, Cosette clicked her tongue, but she still sent him a message. To Max, we are attending a party tomorrow evening, and I'm already bored. How about you go in here on Sunday? Or should I go to you on Sunday so we can hang out? Or are you busy with work? Let me know. If you don't reply, I will just go see you. \\*O**. Threats usually work on him, and I feel bad for using such extreme means, but Cosette giggled as she patiently waited for Maxen's reply. This is for his future. Chapter 37, Stay Connected. From unknown number. We are attending a party tomorrow evening and I'm already bored. How about you go in here on Sunday? Or should I go to you on Sunday so we can hang out? Or are you busy with work? Let me know. If you don't reply, I will just go see you. \\O**. Maxen had his brows furrowed when he received the first message, the unknown number, but after reading the next message, he laughed. It sounds like her, he muttered while staring at her message. Even during weekends, she bothers me. He just stared at the message, amused at how he could hear her voice just by reading it. He could even imagine her frowning and glaring. Maxen was engrossed in imagining her by reading her text that he forgot to reply back. Only when his phone rang did he snap his eyes. It's almost midnight, can't she fall asleep? He muttered, letting his phone ring for a while before answering it. As soon as he placed the phone in front of his ear, he drew it away slightly. Maxen, are you all right? Are you in trouble? Still breathing. Did some people ambush you again? Her continuous inquiry went on for a minute before she calmed down. Max, are you there? Here, he glanced at his old phone and shook his head, placing it back in front of his ear. Gosh, I thought something happened when you didn't reply. Hey, how the hell did you think I will reply to an unregistered number? How did you get my contact number anyway? And do you think everyone is still awake at this hour? Maxen collapsed on his back, lying on the small foam in this crappy small apartment, studio-type apartment. Oh right, I just stole your number when you were sleeping, Cosette mumbled as she bit her tongue, realizing she didn't ask for his consent and just got his number. But how can you not ask for my contact info? How can we communicate during weekends and holidays? Are you planning to bother me even when you're not around? He asked in an annoyed tone, but his face showed otherwise. Maxen bit his lower lips to suppress the smile on his face. Of course, you might forget about me if I don't talk to you. Cosette placed her daily journal inside the drawers before trudging toward her bed. So, are we going to hang out on Sunday? I have a part-time job in the construction during weekends. I'm not like you who doesn't worry about that. Should I work part-time too? Hey, you. Why? Cosette frowned, lying on her side. I didn't mean I will work as a construction worker. I can't do that manual labor. But I mean I will apply as a contractor. Do they hire a muse? Maxen bit his tongue to keep himself from bursting out in laughter. Apply if you want, but I'll be busy. He heard a deep sigh from the other end of the line, making his brows rise. Then I will be in touch. Do you hate weekends, Max? She asked with a sleepy voice. Ah, wait, hang on. I will charge my phone. Let's talk all night until our phones overheat and we fall asleep. Hee. His eyes softened as he listened to the clumsy noises on the other end of the line, along with her devious giggle. She had no idea how she moved him with her gestures. You should sleep, he said, genuinely concerned about her. Come on, just humor me. I can't, I'm sleepy. Then sleep, but don't end the call. Why? Cosette hummed as she blinked her weary eyes. So we stay connected, obviously. Maxen stared at the low ceiling that had traces of the water leak every time it rained. Usually his room would be cold at night, but her voice warmed it up like magic. Max, are you asleep now? She asked and yawned. I'll keep my phone to my side, so keep yours near your pillow, all right? He didn't respond, covering his eyes with his arm while listening to her. How the hell he would sleep if his heart was racing as if he ran a marathon? Just what will it take you to stop stirring my emotions? He wondered, peeking through his one eye. Max, do you know I had a dream? Cosette murmured, knowing that he was still probably listening. In that dream, you are a bad guy who does all sorts of bad things. Bad people will always face retribution, so in the end you died. It's really a sad dream, and even when I woke up I was crying because of it. She paused and sighed, eyes partially closed. Max, can you promise me that you will not do those bad things? Don't hurt people or kill them. Don't always resort to violence, all right? Maxen, do you hear me? Maxen kept his mouth shut while listening to her voice. If she didn't come into his life and brought colors to it, it wasn't impossible that he would turn out to be a criminal. He was on the verge of losing hope in this life before she appeared, after all. But now he didn't know anymore. He wanted to become a better person even though life was still unfair to him. He was once again trying, so he could get out of his crappy life and out of this crappy apartment. Just a normal life where he could walk with his chin held high. He hummed when she stopped talking, replaced with her deep breaths as she had fallen asleep. I promise. Maxen glanced at his phone and smiled subtly. Good night, Cosette. But he didn't end the call because he wanted to stay connected to her one way or another as well. I will try, Cosette, he promised internally, closing his eyes to sleep with her on the line. For you, I also want to be a better person. Chapter 38, The Quinn Holdings Annual Party. The young Master Quinn is surely promising in every aspect. No wonder CEO and Chairman Quinn were so confident. They are surely blessed with a good son. The Quinns have a bright future. I feel very at ease. Asher kept a formal smile as everyone sang praises about him. It was the Quinn Holdings annual party, and like usual, everyone put him on the spot. If he could tell them to stop currying favor to him, he would have done it. However, their family valued affiliation. He had to play by the rules since he would become the head of the family, and he had to get used to this. No matter how boring and annoying it was to hear their praises like a broken record. "Sir, I heard, oh, isn't that Mr. Black?" Asher glanced at the group of businessmen surrounding him and his father as they shifted their attention from him. "I didn't know he will attend tonight's event." "Haha, that man disliked parties and gatherings. The last time I've seen him in a gathering is also a party hosted by CEO Quinn." "Mr. Quinn, how do you make Mr. Black attend your gatherings? He never showed up to any of my invitations." "Ha ha ha, isn't that his daughter? That's new, he never brought her to any parties." The talks around volumed down as Asher twisted his neck to look at the entrance. He didn't know if it was because he lost focus, or it actually quieted down, and everything sounded so distant in his ear with Conrad's appearance. Conrad, although already in his early 40s, was undeniably dashing. But aside from the surprise of this rare specimen's attendance, everyone's attention was on the young lady entering with him. She was holding Conrad's arms, bearing this amused smile as she looked around. Amused, Cosette turned to her father and her lips moved. The latter chuckled with his lips closed, surprising everyone. This wasn't the first time Asher had seen Cosette and Conrad. He bumped into them not long ago, and he was already aware the father and daughter duo have a good relationship, unlike the rumors, but that seemed to surprise the guests. "I didn't know I'd see her again," he thought. That strange girl who transferred into a no-name school for whatever reason. Asher, he was brought back from his trance when his father called him. "Come with me, let's greet Mr. Black and his daughter." Asher nodded, handing the glass of champagne on the tray to the approaching server. He followed his father like usual, hands shoved inside his pocket. On their way to greet Conrad, his little brother suddenly appeared on his side grumpily. Asher cast him a side-eye while his little brother grumbled. "This is why I hate parties." Luke clicked his tongue in irritation, obviously annoyed at the situation. "It's not fun." "Luke!" Luke glared at his older brother before he frowned. "Why do I even have to greet the guests when they should be the one greeting me?" He trailed off, blinking blankly as they stopped in front of Cosette and Conrad. "Mr. Black, I'm so glad you came." Maynard Quinn, the president of the Quinn Holdings, greeted Conrad in a festive tone along with a delighted chuckle. "And you were with the young miss, I see." "I think it is a good occasion to miss." Conrad didn't even smile as he raised his chin, standing toe-to-toe with Maynard. Why are you so imposing?" Maynard snapped his tongue, shaking his head lightly as one would misunderstand they were not on friendly terms. But just before he could add more of his thoughts, his eyes fell on the young lady standing beside Conrad as she giggled. "Conrad, it's been a while since I've seen Cozy. Why don't you introduce her to us properly?" Cosette smiled amicably and then glanced at her father, only for her face to contort. Her father's eyes fell on Luke and Asher, scrutinizing them coldly as if he didn't want to introduce her to them in the first place. "Aish, will you look at him, wanting to hog his daughter all to himself?" Maynard clicked his tongue in dismay, shaking his head. In the end, Conrad simply let out a shallow exhale. "I hadn't introduced my daughter properly. Cozy, greet President Quinn. You've met him on multiple occasions, although you might not remember him that much." Conrad cast his daughter a look and nodded encouragingly, while Maynard scrunched his nose up. Her lips stretched wide, radiating like the morning sun, almost blinding the Quinns. "It was a pleasure to meet you again, President Quinn. My name is Cosette, but my father calls me Cozy." "What a lovely young lady." Maynard's eyes glinted as he sported a smug grin at Conrad. The latter, who knew that look, frowned at this mischievous old friend of his. "I hope you will like the gift I prepared for you," Cosette continued as she shifted her focus on Luke, Asher's brother. Seeing him from this distance, she barely contained herself from screaming her lungs out, although she was already mentally screaming and fangirling. The Quinns' genes were no joke. Cosette subconsciously glanced at the person standing next to Luke. A sparkle beamed from behind her eyes. "Kaya Tilda, I'm so happy to see the Quinn brothers together," she cheered internally while she was mentally break-dancing in happiness. But it was short-lived when she flinched when Asher's cold eyes locked with hers. "You prepared a gift for me?" he inquired while pointing at himself. "Why?" Cosette nodded with a sweet smile. "It might be late, but it's a gift for your birthday." "Really?" Luke's face brightened up as if he wasn't complaining moments ago. "You knew my birthday." "Hee hee, yes really. She nearly melted, as Luke was truly the sweetheart. If Asher was the husband material, every reader of The Devil's Den wanted a boyfriend like Luke. He was just sweet and cute and charming. Suddenly Cosette, who hadn't been thinking too much of the novel aside from changing Maxen's ending, suddenly frowned. Her eyes softened while staring at the young Luke. In the novel, the charming Luke died. It was a heroic sacrifice to save Asher, his big brother, from Maxen. She still remembered bawling her eyes when she read Luke's death. Little did she know, when she forced a smile while Luke was talking to her, Asher was watching her. What's up with that look? He wondered, thinking that Cosette was just smiling sweetly, but the next second her eyes were full of sadness. All right, you sneaky old lad. Why don't we leave the kids so they can get to know each other, eh? The mischievous Maynard hooked an arm over the stoic Conrad, wiggling his brows. Luke, Ash, be good to Cozy, all right? Yes, father, Luke saluted without a second hesitation. Meanwhile, Cosette gazed at Conrad and noticed his displeasure. He was worried, so she smiled at him sweetly. Have fun, Papa. That is impossible. Come on, let your daughter breathe. Maynard dragged the reluctant Conrad against his will while complaining. Why didn't I have a daughter? I never heard my sons call me Papa. Why do you always win in life? Can you tell me the secret? Watching Conrad get dragged by Maynard, Cosette smiled and chuckled as the two looked closer than she initially thought. Meanwhile, both the Quinn brothers had their eyes on her, before Luke snapped her attention back to them. Cozy, come, I'll show you around, he invited excitedly while she smiled from ear to ear. Okay. Chapter 39, Cookie. Since Maynard asked his sons to accompany Cosette, Luke happily took her to the garden. Asher didn't want to come, but between dealing with the adults and watching his foolish brother, the latter was far more entertaining. Don't you attend the same academy as ours? Luke inquired, sitting on the bench sandwiched between Cosette and Asher. Cosette shrugged while holding a saucer of biscuits from the event hall. Not anymore, she answered before munching a cookie. She offered Luke some, and he accepted happily. Not anymore, why were you kicked out? I transferred to another school. She kept her answer short, as it wasn't truly a big deal for her. Cosette was aware Luke was the same year as her. However, they were in a different section. She was in the first section since she only aimed to be the best, while Luke was in the last section. Her personality, the real Cosette, the villainess, was perfectionist and aloof. She was stuck in her own world and barely socialized. In other words, even when they attended the same academy, with her personality, she wasn't able to be friends with the Quinn brothers or anyone in the school. You transferred. Is there any better school than ours? Honest as he was, Luke tilted his head while munching the cookie. Or were you rebelling? I don't think you have a terrible relationship with your father, though. Little did he know, Asher was listening carefully to this conversation, hoping this mystery would finally be answered. What would be Cosette's real reason for transferring? Because it's fun, Luke stared at Cosette. The misplaced innocence in her naturally sharp eyes somehow looked unbelievably sincere. It's not terrible. I made a lot of good friends too, and my new classmates eats lunch with me. Huh? The Quinn brothers blinked in puzzlement. Asher leaned back, catching a glimpse of her honest visage. Fun. His voice came out of his mouth even before he could realize it. MHM, I think the academy is the best in terms of education and facility. It's a good place and would open countless doors of opportunity. It's the perfect place to plan my future, but where's the fun in that? She giggled, a little bit too happy to be sitting on the same bench and spending time with the Quinn brothers. I can always try to excel in the future if I worked hard for it, but for now I want to be dumb and stupid who makes mistakes. So when I look back, I can cringe and laugh at the same time. Her carefree attitude and her energy, mostly because of these two handsome species, made her look dazzling and awe-inspiring. In the Quinn brothers' eyes, she was very warm. As children who were born in a suffocating environment where they had to exceed everyone's unrealistic expectations, her words were akin to a breath of fresh air. Mistakes, be stupid, be children, that was very unheard of. Although Maynard, their father, was a carefree person, they didn't want to disappoint him. Or rather, they didn't want others using Maynard's children as some kind of dirt they could use against him. This barely applied to Luke because, one way or another, even if he was a little rebellious, he still thought of his actions. Probably less than Asher, but it was still suffocating in a way. In other words, Cosette was like a fearless young lady who was brave enough to step out of their world. She was brave enough to dismiss other people's opinions, expectations, and feelings just to live. It might sound selfish or foolish, but it was a decision worthy of respect. What they didn't know was that Cosette just didn't care because she was in a novel and she wanted to save Maxen. It was just as simple as that, and very unlike the conclusion in their heads. Cookie, she held the saucer to Luke and cocked her head, seeing that the two of them were just staring at her blankly. Her brows rose when a minute passed and they didn't respond. Hello, are you still there? She waved her hand in front of Luke, snapping him back from his trance. To her surprise, before she could retract her hand, Luke suddenly grabbed her with both his hands. His eyes were glimmering as if looking at his idol. That is amazing, he remarked and nodded encouragingly. Are we really at the same age? Cosette tried to suppress her flattered smile as she snapped her tongue. Gosh, it's really nothing. My father supports anything I do. I always thought he would get upset if I do something like this, but he's very happy. I mean, his opinion matters the most to me, so I don't think I should think about what others think. It wasn't entirely a lie, but that was just another excuse to justify her actions. I think I'm in love. She blinked and tilted her head again as Luke's sudden confession came out of the blue. We should get married when we become adults, Luke exclaimed, making Asher scrunch his nose up in dismay. Asking Cosette's hand in marriage was already ridiculous, but how he put it wasn't even considered a proposal. It sounded more like an order. Luke, Asher arched a brow when Cosette's lips curled up into a smug grin. She liked it, he wondered while studying the young lady's face. Yes, she did. For a split second, Asher's mind went blank as he assumed she would laugh it off or find it rude. With that smug grin, almost looking evil on her face, one could tell she would say, I do, without a second hesitation. Was this truly the same top student in her class? Asher couldn't truly trust the word of mouth anymore. Cosette was not anything like what he heard from the other students. What do you say? Luke blinked cluelessly, serious about his proposal. Although I am flattered, I can't ditch Maxen. She mentally wept. Never in her wildest imagination did she ever think Luke would propose to her. Unlike her inner regrets, Cosette sported a warm smile. Marriage isn't as easy as giving out cookies. You should work hard for it, and it should be mutual. If I work hard, will you marry me? Well, if I fell in love with you. She shrugged, going with the flow since she was confident that would never happen. But isn't it better to be friends first? I mean, even if we don't end up together, friendship is just as important and long-lasting. We should hang out more often then, Luke cheered excitedly, as becoming friends didn't really sound so bad. As the two had grown closer by the minute, Asher remained silent. He couldn't be bothered by these two. Still, he would constantly glance at the two of them as it seemed they were forgetting him, especially Luke. When he glanced at them again 10 minutes later, he arched a brow when he caught her gazing at him. But instead of saying anything, Cosette simply offered a kind smile. His jaw tightened as he looked away, his first time averting his eyes first. It's because of Luke, he justified in his head. I don't want her to be my sister-in-law. Chapter 40, Everything was just tragic. The Quinn Holdings annual party went by successfully. Cosette mostly spent it with the Quinn brothers, although it was Luke who ranted most of the time, telling her how he had enough of dealing with adults. He said he had enough dealing with them. Cosette, as a devoted fan, who simply wanted to support all these characters from the bottom of her heart, played along. It was actually a treat to her to get to spend time with them. Asher barely spoke throughout the night, though. Overall, she had fun with their company until Conrad fetched her when it was time to go home. Lying on her bed after a night well spent with the Quinn brothers, her smile wouldn't leave her face. Luke is really charming, she breathed out, blushing at the thought of spending her night with not just one but two of the characters in the novel. I'm living the dream indeed, what a treat. Cosette rolled to her side while hugging her giant teddy bear, still smiling from ear to ear. She had spent months with Maxen, and she was happy with her progress with him. But there was just something different from the Quinn brothers' energy that gave her a different type of euphoria. Not only they are handsome, but they're very kind too. Will Maxen get along with them? Her smile, which never left her face, slowly faded as her eyes softened. Luke is friendly and Asher is patient. Although Max has trust issues, he will surely get along with them. She hid her lower face and hugged the teddy bear tightly. Her mood gradually turned somber as she recalled the life the three led. In the novel, since Maxen was ruthless and obsessed with Mia, the female lead, he messed with the Quinn Holdings. It was a chaotic arc with an enemy like Maxen who had zero consciences. It came to a point that things got too dangerous that Maxen tried to kill Asher, Mia's lover, but Luke took the bullet for him. So Luke had met his end at a young age, trying to save his brother. In that timeline, Asher and Luke had a strained relationship because of the constant comparison between the two. How can I forget, she mumbled, that not only Max but Luke and Asher had shared the same tragic story. It may not be the same as Max's experience, but those brothers were also pitiful. For a good 10 minutes, Cosette sulked the more she thought about the original storyline. Although she didn't want to change much in the story, it wouldn't hurt if she tweaked it a bit, right? Maxen was a different case since he didn't have any connection with all the other characters until years later. But it wouldn't be a big deal if she tried to maintain Asher and Luke's relationship, so they wouldn't grow apart. It was not like those two truly hated each other. Luke was simply hurt since others usually compared him with his older brother, and he felt like no matter what he does, he was never enough. Since we're friends now, I should hang out with them too, she mumbled before raising her head, catching her phone on the bedside table. Cosette crawled and grabbed it before she leaned against the headboard. Max didn't even reply to my last message. She frowned before typing a new message. Max, are you asleep? Cosette didn't even hesitate to send the message, smiling when it showed it was read after a minute. However, Maxen didn't reply, which she already expected. What are you doing? Her message was still marked on read, but he didn't reply. Cosette snapped her tongue, wanting to give Maxen a call just to check if he was still sane, but before she could, a notification popped up at the top of her phone screen. Have you returned safely? I opened the gift and it's cool. Let's hang out next time. When are you free? I can hear his voice and see Luke's expression. She giggled, not surprised at how straightforward Luke was. She was about to respond when she tilted her head. Isn't it a good time to introduce Max to them? If they became friends, maybe, he won't try to kill Asher and Luke wouldn't die saving his brother. She mulled over it for quite some time, nodding in agreement. Although she was already working on hindering Maxen from becoming a ruthless felon, it wouldn't hurt to be sure, right? All she wanted was for all of them to live life peacefully, without one of them dying. Yes, we arrived home early. I had fun, thanks to your company. I love the cookies too, let's buy some sometimes. I'm mostly free during the weekends. Cosette didn't think twice when she replied to Luke. In her mind, there was no way Luke would hang out with her soon. Hence, she just gave a vague answer since she could make time during the weekend. Great, say you then. I'm excited to spend more time with him. Oh right, Cosette didn't think much about Luke's reply and got distracted by another thought. If I hang out with Luke, I'd see more characters. Her eyes sparkled at the thought of meeting more characters. As she was getting distracted on the long list she had in mind, she snapped her eyes when a ding sound reached her ears. She lifted the phone up only to read a bland, working reply from Maxen. Gosh, is he that busy to only send one word? She mumbled with a pout, but then remembered that Maxen had always been like that. Max should just live in here. If only he lives under the same roof as mine, I wouldn't always worry about his well-being. He's very unfriendly too, so he always gets in trouble. Cosette shook her head and sighed. I'm sleepy. She muttered and typed what she just thought and unhesitatingly sent it, since she knew he wouldn't care anyway. It took him a minute before he replied with another short reply, sleep. What time is he going to clock out? She wondered and typing the question before pressing send. This time he didn't respond. She waited, staring at the screen before she decided to call him. Chapter 41, bonus chapter. It's the weekend, isn't it? Rings, ring. Maxen arched a brow as his phone kept vibrating in the back pocket of his pants. Even without seeing who it was, he knew it was Cosette. He ignored it as he closed the convenience store he was working at. It was rather early for him, but it was the orders from his boss, which he found a little strange. Once the padlock was secure, he reached for his phone and gazed at the broken screen. A subtle smile appeared on his face, only to shake his head upon realization. Have some shame, will you? He ruffled his head, packing back and forth in front of the shop in irritation. Why would you smile like that? Deep down, he still believed Cosette was just kind, and was concerned about him as a friend. He shouldn't like her, at least. Not in a different way. She's kind and friendly and warm, and beautiful. He stopped and huffed, glaring at her name on the broken screen of his phone. You're ugly and fat and poor, Maxen. She deserves someone better. His tone grew bitter as he smiled wearily at the ringing phone. Logically, that was correct. If Cosette didn't transfer school, he wouldn't even meet her in this lifetime. Her life, she was a real princess, a star that was beyond his reach. He shouldn't even think about any romantic fantasies about her. Maxen knew where to stand. That was why it was even harder to stay beside her. Ding! His brows rose as the call ended without him picking up. showing the numbers of missed calls from her. And then another notification popped up, and it was her message. Maxen Cloven, I have tons of stories to share. Are you really busy? He clicked his tongue through his gritted teeth before another message from her popped up. This time it was just a voice message, followed by more, spamming him with voice messages. He watched them flood his inbox until she finally stopped. Maxen stared at the screen for a minute after the messages stopped coming and then scrolled up to her first voice message. When he took a step from his spot, he held his phone near his ear and listened to her voice. Maxen, have you eaten dinner at least? You always work hard, that's why I'm always worried. I had this cookie at the party we attended and I met new friends. His eyes softened the more he listened to her voice, telling him what she did throughout the day as if she didn't want him to miss a day in her life. Cosette even nagged every once in a while like a worried mom, and he would chuckle every time. There was no doubt this was Cosette, he thought. She would nag him and then continue to what she was saying. She was silly, but her silliness was her charm. Max, will you even listen to all the voice messages I sent you? She wondered in a sleepy voice, yawning quite adorably. Honestly, I don't know. You might not though because you're tired. No, he would listen to them. Actually, the ones she sent weren't even enough for him. He would surely replay them until he falls asleep. But anyway, always take care of yourself, all right? I mean, always remember that under the same sky, someone is sincerely concerned about you. I only want the best for you. You don't have any idea. It was silly of her to send this type of voice message, thinking he wouldn't listen to them anyway. Maxen stopped the more he listened to her voice messages, until he reached the last one. It's really sad that I didn't get to hear you, but I hope you have a peaceful and good dream. She chuckled sweetly before she yawned once again. Good night, Max. I'll still bother you tomorrow, hee. He stood in the same spot, and in the exact same position for a minute, before lowering his hand with the phone. He looked up at the clear night sky, ignoring the cables hanging over the establishment of an old area in the town. Under the same sky and moon, he whispered gently, eyes soft and a heavy heart, "Good night, Cosette." That night something went crystal clear to Maxen. He was filthy, shameless, and ambitious because he liked her not just as a friend, but he liked her. He didn't know when it started or the exact reason. Was it because she was kind to him? Was it because she was the first person to approach him with a pure intention? Or was it the fact that she didn't see him or look at him just like everybody else? He didn't know which for sure, but he knew it was a little bit of everything. Either way, he liked her, and he would be forever grateful for her existence. Just like this night, there was a moon that radiated to those who didn't have the privilege to have light to see through the night. Cosette was his moon, the light in his pitch-black path and world, but the moon was too far beyond his reach as well. The next day, "Hello, good morning." Cosette blinked twice to see if she was seeing things correctly. Right across from her in the dining hall was Luke Quinn. "So Black, thank you for letting me join you for breakfast." Luke turned and flashed Conrad a bright smile. The latter stared at the young boy with his classic unresigned expression, sighing faintly when he recalled the morning call he received this morning. It was Maynard, Luke reminded him of his father. "Dig in," Conrad nodded and motioned his hand, glancing at Cosette when she finally recollected her thoughts. "Luke, what are you doing here so early in the morning?" she asked wide-eyed. "You said you're only available during weekends. It's Sunday today, isn't it?" His smile grew brighter, almost making Cosette and Conrad shield their eyes as he was blinding. "Goodness, my heart," she mentally planted her hand on her chest, moved and not surprised by Luke's personality, since this was surely something he would do. "Ah," she laughed awkwardly, the complete opposite reaction from her internal dialogues. "Huh?" Baffled at her awkward reaction, Luke tilted his head. "Do you have plans for today?" Cosette pressed her lips into a thin line and gazed at him for several seconds. "Yes, but if you don't mind, you can come." The side of her lips curled up, thinking that this could be a blessing in disguise. Chapter 42, First Bus Ride. "Bye, Tilda." Luke looked at her with a slight surprise when George the driver dropped them off at the bus stop. After having breakfast with the Blacks, Cosette told him he could tag along with her for today's extravaganza. He didn't know what she was up to, but he was already curious. "Why did he drop us off here?" he asked, blinking innocently. "Because we will take the bus." Her answer was quick, sporting an innocent front as well. "I know that, but why?" "What do you mean, why? So it will take us to where we're going." Cosette cocked her head to the side, and then it hit her. Both of them were rich kids. They didn't need to ride a bus to go to wherever they wanted to go. She cleared her throat and giggled at the thought. Cosette bumped her shoulder against him mildly. I take the bus, she clarified, perking her chin up when she caught the approaching bus. It's nice to ride a car, and it is convenient, but sometimes commuting isn't bad too. You will learn a lot. Ever wonder why others are so streetwise? She added, and at the same time, the bus slowly halted in front of the shade they were standing under. You will never see the outside world if you don't go out of your box. Let's go and be humans. Cosette chuckled as she slapped his chest with the back of her hand before skipping her steps and hopping onto the bus. Luke frowned but still followed, shrugging as he didn't mind riding the bus. He couldn't be a baby now since he didn't have other plans for today aside from hanging out with her. As they entered and paid, Cosette did. Since Luke didn't know how to, Luke looked around the bus. There were already a few people inside, following Cosette, and they sat down 2 rows from the back seat. Cosette sat down near the window while he perched beside her. Do you always take the bus? He asked out of plain curiosity. Every day. Cosette flashed him a smile. I ride the bus when I go to school and when I go home. Uncle George fetched me at the bus stop where he dropped us off. Why? This time, Cosette frowned slightly. I just told you, I want to be human. Do you mean you want to be a commoner? That's quite rude. Do you think saying you want to be human isn't rude? He scrunched his nose up, holding onto the handle attached to the seat in front of him. You're like saying being rich means you're not human. Did that offend you? Not really, but well, it still makes me think you see me as not human. She chuckled as she leaned back. Not that she sees him as not a human, but he was a character in the novel. Cosette glanced at him with her lips stretched from ear to ear. Even though Luke was a character in the novel, he felt real, just like Maxen and Conrad and everyone she met so far. What? His brows rose upon noticing her prolonged gaze. Nothing, she shook her head lightly. I'm just happy that you went to see me today. I was surprised, but I'm glad my friend came to see me, needless to say. As the last syllable escaped her lips, Cosette turned her head to the window and smiled subtly. Meanwhile, Luke could only stare at her and his cheeks slowly flashed red. For Luke, he thought Cosette would find him strange by coming by early in the morning without prior notice. But he still did, because he had nothing else to do today, and he wanted to be friends with her. People used to say his character was a little too much, and he was so impulsive. So he was relieved she didn't think like that. Luke stared at her side and smiled subtly, leaning back and making himself comfortable. This is my first, he remarked after minutes of silence, noticing her look back at him through his peripheral vision. My first bus ride. I never rode one before. It's not as convenient as riding a private car. Well, I don't think there's a huge difference. He turned his head back to her, only to see her grin. What? You'll know why it's inconvenient sometimes, but it's still fun. His brows furrowed at her answer but didn't dwell on it longer. Luke only realized what she meant by that when more people rode the bus and filled all the vacant seats. When he thought the bus wouldn't stop to take more passengers, he was wrong, because not long after, there were already people standing in the aisle. Shit! Luke jumped to Cosette's side when the man's crouch leaned closer to his shoulder along with the movements of the bus. He gazed up at the man, who didn't seem aware of what was going on down there in dismay. Cosette chuckled as she squeezed herself to the window so he could have more room. I told you. Shit! Luke ground his teeth, face flustered as he faced her squarely. We are overloading, he said in a quiet voice. But the bus isn't full yet. He gasped in disbelief, glancing around to check the crowded bus. You don't call this full? He looked back at her in dismay. You'll get used to it, Cosette giggled. Welcome to the real world. Damn, he huffed in distress as he looked around and his face contorted when the bus stopped once again. Some passengers hitched out, but the people kept on coming until it was fully packed and everyone was inhaling each other's breath. While Luke was trying so hard to avoid the people standing on the aisle, Cosette stared at him with a smile. For her, it was only natural for him to act this way since he was born with a golden spoon, but Luke was taking it better than she expected. When she noticed a middle-aged lady standing up, Cosette tapped his shoulder to catch his attention. She smiled when he looked back at her. My time is up, excuse me. Chapter 43, bonus chapter Who the hell is that fatty? When Cosette told Luke her time was up, he was baffled and thought they would get off the bus. So Cosette had to explain to him she wanted to forfeit her seat to the elderly. She already thought Luke had taken his first bus ride well, so she didn't want to pressure him to give up his seat for another. To her surprise, Luke told her to sit down and gave his seat to the middle-aged woman like a gentleman. Luke, although not pleased with standing throughout the ride, didn't complain. "Do you always give up your seat?" he asked when they finally hitched outside the bus. "No," she shook her head as they stood under the shade. "I only give it up to the elderly, pregnant women or those who were traveling with children. Are you all right?" Luke sighed as he planted hands on his hips. "I will be lying if I said it's fine. It's inconvenient, and I don't understand why would you want to ride the bus when riding your car saves you more time." "Well," Cosette pressed her lips and smiled, shrugging as she breathed out sharply. "It's just, I want to do something that is new to me. It's only a hassle at first, but it's not that terrible when you get used to it, trust me." "I might not ride a bus again," he thought, but kept it to himself as he glanced around. "Don't tell me we're going to ride another bus again." No, we'll walk." She chuckled and smiled sweetly, watching him raise a brow in confusion. "Just where are we going?" he wondered, seeing that excited smile on her face. Luke had thought there was a mall she wanted to go to, or just an amusement park she would like to see. There were myriads of wonderful places he knew, but he believed there were better ones since Cosette wouldn't travel for an hour and walk for minutes if it was not worth seeing. To his dismay, the place they went to wasn't a tiny mall, or a hidden oasis in this area. Luke found himself sitting inside the convenience store and in front of the transparent glass wall. Across the street was a construction site. You ride for over an hour, went through the hassle of squeezing with the crown, and then walked for about 15 minutes to eat ice cream, he asked as he slowly turned his head to Cosette, who was sitting beside him. "M.H.M., she hummed and nodded, enjoying the ice cream she bought for her and him. "It's good. You should eat yours before it melts. It'll cool your head." Right. Luke could only stare at her for minutes, as he couldn't believe this. And then, after eating that ice cream, "What are you planning to do?" Cosette pondered about it, as she didn't really have a concrete plan. All she had in mind was to hang out with Maxen, but he said he would have to work at the construction site. They used to pass by this area. Some construction workers would sometimes call Maxen whenever they would see him, so Cosette knew this was what he meant when he said he would have to hustle. "Maybe have lunch," she shrugged, chuckling when Luke scrunched his nose up. "Were you disappointed?" "Yes," his answer was quick and honest. "I mean, I don't see the fun in this. It's not like I want to go home now and leave you, but this is just something I didn't expect." When you have no money, things like this are fun." He frowned. "But you have money." "It's not mine, it's my dad's." "It's the same. He was working hard for you to have a good and comfortable life," Luke argued as a matter of fact. "Makes sense, but spending what my father worked hard for so thoughtlessly is something I can but don't want to do." Cosette shrugged once again, thinking about her argument twice since she didn't want to go hard on him and tell him she didn't want to be entitled. "It might be a little complicated, but our wealth is the product of my ancestors and my father's blood, sweat, tears, and even countless sleepless nights." She then shifted her gaze ahead, staring through the glass wall and at the construction site. "I just cannot take everything for granted just because everything is prepared for me. I might have a head start for being born privileged, but there's also this feeling that I am also being left behind in another area. There were us who were lucky to have rich parents, and I'm grateful to have such comfort in life," she continued and flashed him a kind smile. "But there were those people who didn't have rich parents and had to do pure hustle to achieve a more comfortable life. Both can be smart and succeed in life and inspire, but this makes me happy and the life I want to live. Living is different from just existing." Her smile was bright but soft, not blinding but soothing. Luke opened his mouth, but his voice was stuck in his throat. Not that Cosette hurt his feelings by being biased, but she carefully put her words as being rich doesn't necessarily mean they were better people. They were still equal, and for Luke, this was her means of keeping her feet on the ground. He never thought of that before. Luke was the type who gets everything he wanted without working hard for it. He was arrogant, and he knew that, but that was him, and he already embraced that side of him. "Oh," he snapped his eyes after a moment when Cosette suddenly grabbed her phone and dialed someone. His brows furrowed when she grinned happily, springing up from her seat and waving at someone. Out of curiosity, Luke slowly shifted his eyes in the direction she was waving and frowned. "Who the hell is that fatty?"